Hello and welcome again to another episode of This Week in Christian History. And we are going to talk this week about something known as the Avignon Papacy, sometimes the Babylonian Captivity, depending on who you're talking to and what that's all about. And we are glad to have an expert in this field of medieval history. Who she teaches medieval history at the University of Rhode Island and is an expert in all that we are doing here as well. Dr. Joëlle Rollo-Koster is with us. So we are so grateful to have you join us. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Well, it seems there are so many moving parts to this story of the Avignon Papacy. It's almost like you need a flow chart, right? I mean, you've almost got to have a visual to see all the interacting pieces that are going here on with this. But give us some background. I know that's not necessarily a quick thing to do, but some background of kind of what is going on in the papacy, the time frame that we're talking
Sure.
about here, and who the major players are. How about
Sure.
that?
So you cannot really understand the Avignon Papacy if you do not understand the history of Rome.
Mm,
Number one, people have an impression that the medieval papacy was similar to the papacy we have today, which
mm.
is not true. I don't know if you have had anybody else working on the papacy coming and talking to you, but the medieval papacy is a spiritual, religious, but extremely political entity.
Hmm.
And then, in addition to being a political entity globally, dealing with all of, we cannot call them nation states, but, the kingdoms and the princedom, and that makes medieval Europe. Not only do they deal with the external world, but there is also a lot of things to be said about their dealing within the city of Rome.
Ah,
So, all of this, I'm going to try to make short an introduction, which could be very long.
that's
But,
okay.
why did the papacy move to Avignon? Well, because Rome was a mess. And
Mm,
the biggest issue with the Avignon papacy is that there is a lot of propaganda, and that propaganda is coming essentially from one person. And it's absolutely stunning that one person could do this for centuries. But that one person is Francesco Petrarch or Petrarca, the
hmm.
early humanist, because Petrarca literally trashed the Avignon papacy, pretending himself to be a pure, Italian, when in fact he was raised in Avignon. He spent more than 20 years in Avignon. Petrarca is the one who called it the Babylonian Captivity. So
Ah,
it is Petrarca which made the Avignon papacy that kind of puppet from the King of France, but it was not. I have spent my career trying to demonstrate it was not. So how do we end up in Avignon? Very simply, very, very short story is that the situation in Rome is a mess. For centuries in Rome, the papacy has been, I would say, I like to say, I don't know if controlled is too much of a hard word, but basically the papacy is in the hand of the big aristocratic families of Rome, the Orsini, the Colonna, the Savelli. And then at the end of the 13th century, we have a new guy from a new family called the Caetani. The Caetani is not liked by the Orsini and the Colonna and the Savelli. And in any case, all of these aristocratic effervescence, if you want, is going to have parties aligning with friends, and trying to be really nasty to the last, to one of the last pope, which really remained
hmm.
in Rome, who was Boniface VIII. But another thing that people are not aware is that Rome was always so unstable and so unhealthy that if you look at the history of the papacy, most popes did not stay in Rome. Rome is full of malaria, for example.
Mm,
So most popes are going to spend, if you calculate, if you have, let's say, a 10-year reign of a pope, Of those 10 years, I would bet you that for most Pope, 4 are being spent someplace else.
Wow.
Viterbo, Anagni, basically, let's get away. All summer long, you are out of Rome because it's too unhealthy. So what's going to happen is that we're going to have in 1303 a Pope, Boniface VIII, who is not going to please, who is going to have a big argument with his own aristocracy, the aristocracy of Rome, which is united with France. Again, I'm making the story, I'm simplifying the story.
Oh yeah. Well, you don't have to go more so. I mean, we're history people. Okay. We
Yeah,
love this. We love the stuff. Okay.
but basically it is the Colonna of Rome who are going to make the effort to ally themselves with the King of France, Philippe the Fair. And eventually, so Philippe the Fair, for the one who know a little bit more about their French history, is the one who dissolved the Templars. So Philippe
Mhm.
the Fair needs a lot of cash. Why does he need cash? Because he wants to attack the Brits. So what do we do? What Philippe the Fair does eventually is that he's going to tax the French clergy. All kings have done that. But usually you ask permission from the Pope. So you go
Mm,
to the Pope and you say, can I tax your clergy? Do I have, are you allowing me to take the money which should come back to you? Are you
right.
allowing me to take it so I can spend it on war? And usually popes would have said yes. But in the case of Philippe the Fair, who is quite arrogant, he's going to go to the Pope and he will not ask permission. So the Pope is going to get mad. Eventually, there is going to be a back and forth of decrees between, Philip the Fair saying this guy is a heretic, and then the Pope saying, well, I'm going to excommunicate you. And then there is going to be a breaking point when the Pope, Boniface VIII, is going to say, you know what? Spiritual power is way above temporal power. So you, the king, you really need to obey to me. This is going to really make Philippe the Fair mad. He's going to send his troops. I'm going to get to Avignon. He's going to send
No.
his troops down to where the Pope was, which is Anagni. They are going to rough up the Pope. There is no other word. I mean, the town of Anagni let them come in. They let him rough up the Pope. Then they're going to go and defend and free the Pope. In any case, that Pope is going to die a month later. And there is going to be a new election. That new election is going to elect a pope with the Italian, I think, Benedict XI, who is going to die very quickly. And
Mhm.
then there is a very long conclave. Who are we going to elect? And they are going to try to choose somebody because of the mess between France and Italy, because of all the lobbies in Rome with all of the Italian family, aristocratic families,
Right.
they are going to take the decision to find a neutral person. Who do they find? They find the Archbishop of Bordeaux, who is very known, Bertrand de Gaulle, who is very known for his savviness in politics. Very
Mm.
diplomatic. He has been dealing with France and England. He's in Bordeaux, he's in Gascony. He's navigating in the Hundred Years' War that you should know about after reading Barbara. So he's navigating the Hundred Years' War. He's able to navigate all of the party. But when they elect him, it's going to take 1 year to get that election. When they elect him, Bertrand is in Lusignan, which is in Poitou. So
Okay.
he needs to make his way for his coronation because he cannot make it back to Rome. In Rome, it's still chaos. The Roman aristocracies are fighting. So he is going to be crowned pope in the city of Lyon.
Okay.
Lyon in France. Actually, there is some fun moment because as he's parading after he has been crowned, the crown is going to fall from his head. The spectators are going to collapse. It's an entertaining. It's a sad, but it really gives you an idea of how the popes were the rock stars of the time. Basically, we are having a papal inauguration in our town, and everybody's coming and everybody's fighting in order to get in.
Sure.
Long story short, Clement V is crowned, but there is a lot of issues to deal with. He
And
knows
he's
that
in his papal name, which he's crowned as which pope?
Clement V.
Clement the Fifth, right?
Clement
Okay,
V
all
is
right.
crowned, and he is going to say, to think, okay, I need to deal with all of the issues with Philip the Fair, the King of France. I need to deal with the Hundred Years' War. And I need to deal with the Papal States, which are in total chaos because of all the stuff going on in Rome with the aristocratic family, with the Colonna's aristocratic family from Rome, always attacking the papacy. So what Clement is going to do is that he's going to call a great council, and that's the big council of Vienna. And that council is going to deal with, well, the King of France wants him to deal with the previous Pope, Boniface VIII. He wants to make the devil out of him, and Clement doesn't want that. Philip the Fair wants him to deal with the Templar, the dissolution of the Templars orders. Clement doesn't want to do that. So Clement said, we're calling a great council, and we're going to do that council in Vienna. But Vienna, no, it's I'm saying Vienna because I'm anglicizing the French Vienne. But we're talking about the Vienne on the Rhone, very close to the city of Avignon. So
Okay.
when Clement calls for the Council of Vienna, which is going to open, I think, like in 1310, told you I have not reviewed anything.
That's
In 1310, he's going to say, I need space to bring all of those people in. Right? It's a big council. Where can I lodge all of these people? Because Vienne is not going to have enough people. Where can I lodge my court? So it's going to say, oh, but there is this little city called Avignon, which is a part of the papal state since the Albigensian Crusade. So why don't I settle myself in Avignon for the time of the council?
because we kind of own it, for lack of a better way of saying it. It's a
Yes.
papal state. I'm
And
not
it's
in France.
and it's exactly.
I'm not in the Holy Roman Empire,
Now,
right? I mean, this is kind of still, if you want to think of it that way, kind of church owned territory.
oh, well,
And
oh,
so
but
it's
it is church
right.
owned.
But so there's no reason to think that I'm giving this council, nobody has a leg up, nobody's
No,
got any
no.
extra, but Rome's a mess. We don't want to go down there. I'm trying to get that direction. It's just going to be better for us to bring everybody together. And this would be a good place
Yes.
for us to have it in part of that. So, hey, we're enjoying our conversation very much here about learning about the Avignon Papacy, and we have so many facts about so many moving parts here that we're really enjoying part of this time. So, I'm sorry, Professor. Keep trucking.
Well, so what's going to happen is that the Council of Vienne is going to end up, and then Clement is going to die, and then we're going to have successors to Clement, whose number one job is to think we cannot return to Rome until the Papal States have been pacified.
Mm.
So there is one pope after the other who are going to send what you call papal legate down to Rome and down to all of the papal states, because you cannot basically bring the papacy into a den of wolves until all of the wolves are gone. So in essence, there is a kind of, it's not a premeditated plan. It's a
Mm.
combination of a situation, a moment in time where a pope is elected, and a moment in time where the situation in Rome is as it has always been. And what that conclave tried to do is, in fact, try to find a person who would be a neutral ground in order to pacify all of these aristocratic families in Rome. And
Who all had a vested interest. I mean, right? I mean, they all
yes,
had their
they
own
yes,
financial interests. They had plenty of other things outside of trying to do things for the good of the church, right? I mean, they had all these jobs and offices and things that they wanted to be able to be given to them, and it was a power grab, right? Or they want to hold on
but
to it, right?
it is, and again, this is when and where the crowd today, people today, folks today, always imagine that it's just a purely, spiritual job. I mean, no. The best example. I'm a social historian. I'm not really an institutional historian. When you bring the papacy to Avignon, Avignon is going to profit like crazy from having. It's the same way when you create a capital in any one of the state,
Sure.
um, and then Rome, of course. While you have the papacy in Rome, all of the people traveling to Rome are bringing in money. The innkeeper, the hostel keeper,
Mhm.
the washers, the one who cook, think about all of the jobs that a larger population is going to create. And of course, that is going to benefit Avignon during the 14th century. And one of the big issue for Rome is that Rome is going to lose economically. But on the other hand, politically, the city of Rome was always have had a love hatred relationship between not a love relationship, because yes, we like to have the cash coming in created by the capital of Christianity. But you know what? We don't like when we see a pope telling us, well, politically, you shouldn't do this or that or that. I
Mhm.
want my prefect to do with this. So the Commune of Rome does not like that.
Mhm.
So it's actually very interesting to see how Rome, on the one hand, is really mad that, the Pope is gone, we are poor, and, keep whining about that. On the other hand, you hear, well, rock and roll, because we can do whatever we want, because now the Pope is gone, is way too far for us, to interfere. So it's a balance. But to finish the loop, the
Mhm.
papacy went back to Italy a first time under Urban V in 1367. That first return, the Pope thought Cardinal Albornoz, you have some of the great, fighting cardinals, pacifying the papal states. And Urban thought Rome would be quiet enough for him to return. He go back, they kick him out. So
Mhm.
then he has to come back to Avignon. And then there is going to be a second attempt in 1377 when Gregory the 11th is
Mhm.
going to return to Rome. And then we have that great moment in history where the commotion is going to be so important during the election that we're going to have what is called the beginning of the Great Western Schism, when we have two popes and eventually three until 1417, and then one in Avignon and then one in Rome. But one thing I want to add is that lots of people who know a little bit, the one who don't know anything, don't know anything. But the people who know a little bit about the 14th century always conflate the Avignon Papacy with the Great Western Schism. It's
Ah.
wrong. The Avignon Papacy is a recognized papacy. When you look at the name of popes, the popes of the Avignon Papacy, the seven of them, are recognized as, successor of St. Peter if you are a Catholic.
Mhm.
The Great Western Schism, that's a parenthesis. It is only linked to the Avignon papacy in the sense because one of the pope elected during the schism went back to Avignon. And why not? He had the capital, he had the staff, he had people who knew, how to deal with the administration. So
Sure.
it was very convenient for him to go back to Avignon, not to go back, to go to Avignon, to a place
Mhm.
where he would have a capital already all established. So that's
Right.
what I wanted to
It's not like they just went to Cologne or they went to, York or they went to some spot where there was no, where they had to build everything back up
yes,
again, right? The infrastructure, if you will, was already there. And
everything
it
was
was,
there.
it
There
was,
was a big papal palace, which was a fortress, and the big thing for Avignon is that there was a bureaucratic staff which had been trained by local university, and the Avignon papacy was very good at creating red tape and bureaucracy. So all of these people were there. Some had traveled back to Rome, but the Pope in Rome during the schism suffered far way more than the Pope in Avignon because he did not have most of the staff, most of
ah.
the administration prefer to be in France than to be in Italy. You can eat and drink better.
No bias in that one, right?
There
Okay.
was no bias whatsoever.
That's fine. Well, so how long did the Avignon Papacy last?
Okay, so it's less than 100 years. It's from like Clement installed himself in Avignon in 1309, and
Hmm.
Gregory the 11th returned in 1377. So
Which is
that
kind of the date that we're marking for our time frame for this
yes,
for as our this week piece to do. And if
yes.
I have to cheat and look at my notes, but I have March 27th is that day is when he goes when Gregory heads out. But that may be, but regardless, it gives us a marker of a reason to be able to talk about this fairly interesting time. Well, why did they stay in Rome? I mean, if things were working out, I mean, was that because a new pope came back in and said, nope, Rome's it after this Avignon thing, or
Well, I
why
think
did the papacy stay that way?
that's a power of tradition. When Pope Leo in the 5th century
Hmm.
sold the idea that Rome as capital of the Roman Empire, Rome as the place of the martyrdom of Saint Peter and Saint Paul,
Right.
Rome as the place where you have, all of the saints, Rome as the papacy as a kind of continuation of the Roman Empire.
Hmm.
Um, that's a power of tradition. And then the French Pope, specifically somebody. So it's funny because Petrarca gave that description of the French popes as being like party animals, but which they were not. And again, it's all trashing. Those were people who were deeply serious and thinking about how quickly can we go back, but just at this point, we just cannot go back because
Hmm.
I think I'm persuaded. I spent 40 years studying it. Um, I'm persuaded that they had that deep understanding that this was a tradition that you just could not break. On the other hand, um, when you go to Avignon today, you will see that there is a mass of tourists. So a lot of Christian and Catholics
Sure.
still come to Avignon and still consider Avignon as one of the seats of the papacy. So
Mm.
it's the tourists come, tons of Italian tourists. When
Yes.
I go, and when you work on the Avignon papacy, where are your archives? Where your archives for the population, for the social history are in Avignon, but the papal archives are in Rome. So
Mm.
there is a total acceptance for the Avignon papacy that there is like a shared history there. But my Avignon popes, because they're mine, understood that you don't break a tradition. You don't break more than 1,300 years
Sure. Well,
of
they were still the
Catholic.
Bishop of Rome, though, right? I mean, even though, I mean, they
Yes,
still had that
yes.
title, even if they were in Avignon, they were still
He's still,
Bishop of
but
Rome, right?
the only issue is that during the inthronization and the consecration, he cannot physically walk to the Lateran palace to be consecrated Bishop of Rome. So what they did, when you enter the Avignon palace, they have, like Clement VI, as chapels to kind of recreate, if you want, the holy steps of to recreate like a Lateran where you can get a consecration. But no,
Hmm.
the power, I would say, not only the power of history but the power of architecture. The papacy is tied physically to Rome.
Sure.
The mausoleum of Adrian. I mean, they are so many things from Castel Sant'Angelo to the Vatican, to the Lateran. The stones are also linked to the to the papacy. So they understood that.
Right, right. So if there's no big defining reasons not to, I mean, if there, because there's no, let me think of the way I'm trying to say this. There was no big defining enough reasons to either stay in Avignon or to be able to leave Rome
Yes,
again. Okay, we're here.
yes.
That was a time we did that. We're done. Okay, now let's move on. I mean, let's just stay on.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
about where. So, how did things interact? with Philip the Fair and his successors and other kings. You know, we've talked about the walk to Kanasa on our podcast, and we've talked about the that arm wrestle, right, between the
Yep,
state and the church and
yep,
who's in charge. And don't make me pull this excommunication out of my back
yep,
pocket, right? I
yep.
mean, these kind of conversations like this. How did the Avignon Papacy help to uh, placate that for a while? Obviously, it would not for another in about another 100 years or so. It'll be another whole thing with the with the Protestant Reformation. But I mean, it still did it placate those things for a while?
Um, I would say the Avignon popes were very smart
Mm,
because what they did is that they placated everybody around them with their administration. And so the sad part about the history of the Avignon popes is that they are presented as being puppets manipulated by France. It just happened that they are closer physically to what was the nation of France at the time than when they were in Italy. On the other hand, in France, they are less manipulated by the Roman aristocracy than
mm,
what the papacy is when it is in Rome, in
hmm.
parentheses. But what the papacy is going to do, so one of the big stumbling block in the relationship between papacy and state is the nomination of, bishops, of abbots and stuff like that.
Right.
The Avignon popes are going to become masters at controlling all of this. This is also why they got a very bad reputation, because they are the one that are going to say, oh, a bishop is dead. No king of France is going to tell me who I'm going to name. I am going to name that bishop.
Hmm.
Bishop in England is dead. I am going to name. So it's called the collation.
Hmm.
They took care of the collation of benefits from the top to the bottom. Basically, even if a priest wanted to have a little prebend in a little church, they
Hmm.
were involved. So for me, that's a masterstroke at how do you push away temporal powers by actually taking over and totally taking over the thing that they were doing. And then you have taxation. The kings, the states, whatever you want to call them, the
Sure.
monarchies, the principalities, the republics, were all trying to so the church is going to tax. The church taxes a lot in the Middle Ages. A lot of money goes to the church. So because a lot of money goes to the church, states say, well, I want a piece of that money, right?
Right.
Or I want a lot of that money. So what the Avignon popes are going to manage to do is basically they set up a system of what you call collectors, tax collectors. They set up people who are going to be farming taxes, who are going to be very reliable. We have tons of material on that.
Oh,
So
really?
very, very, very well documented. And the Avignon papacy is going to end up controlling the cash and the nominations.
Okay. What else is there's
So
not
what
much
else is
left?
there? What
Right.
else is there? But again, they get that very dark image because we kind of like to have that idea of, the popes and orgies and stuff like that. But
Right.
no, those were guys who were business, business,
Right.
business. We are being attacked. We are now going to defend the church. And they did very, very well by, collection of laws. But no, I always say to my students, if they want to hear it,
Hmm.
that bureaucracy and red tape was invented by the Avignon papacy. The idea of going through all of those stumbling blocks, and you have to have a meeting with that person, then you need to pay
Right.
an entry fee for this, an entry fee for that, and stuff like that. They invented all of that. Going to the DMV in Rhode Island is a good example of what the Avignon papacy was. I don't know how it is with you.
Right, but I mean, but let's just call that red tape as human infrastructure, right? And so if you had that set up in Avignon, all that human infrastructure had to have a place to sleep, had a place to eat, had a place to be able to have their, their families there. So if you're Avignon, you're not really excited about losing any of it to go back to Rome, right? So you
Absolutely.
would like to keep it there as well. And if things are moving well enough, and if I'm a pope that doesn't have to have some of these other ruling families or aristocracy or hierarchical or influential families around me like a bunch of gnats all the time, right? And I can kind of do my thing the
Yeah.
way I want to do my thing. Why wouldn't you want to stay over there some more, right? They followed. It doesn't mean there are no problems. It doesn't mean you're still
Yeah.
not going to have people trying to get into your, into your control of what you're doing. It's not like you eliminated that, but it greatly reduced that, though, wouldn't
Yeah.
you say? Okay.
But the issue is that you have an extremely great administrative machine created, founded by the Avignon Papacy. Because I need to bring them in
Mm,
that administrative machine, the cardinals are going to be very important administrators. And one of, I would say, I'm going to get a lot of, and I don't know if people are going to like that, but one of the issue for the Avignon Papacy is that the popes, who were sound administrators, needed to have efficient administrators. And
hmm.
they let the cardinals empower themselves by being those powerful administrators. And
Ah,
eventually, the cardinals are going to say, you know what? The Pope really needs us. So why don't we create an oligarchy? And you cannot separate the idea of a somewhat oligarchic system where you have a pope ruling with his council of cardinals, if you want, where the cardinals are doing a lot of, I mean, the cardinals are going to be great legates in the war, in the Hundred Years' War. You
mm,
send the Orsini's there, you send so the cardinals become important, so important that in 1378, when they elect a pope, who they think is going to be a good guy, but who does not really bow to them, they're going to say, this was the wrong elections. It was too dangerous. We drew him out of the lot just because we wanted to go quickly. And we were wrong. He's not the one we should have elected. Let's elect another pope. So I think that the mess with the return of the papacy
hmm.
is essentially created by most historians of the schism will now agree that the cardinals are the one who created that mess. And that mess started, then you have what you call conciliarism, where
Hmm.
councils say, you know what, when a pope is not infallible, and if the pope is messing up, a council can step in and rule for the pope and deal with this. And then you really have to wait for the popes of the so-called Renaissance to say, no, 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 no,
No, no, no,
I'm the
right,
boss.
right.
There is, but the good administrations of the Avignon Papacy created the issue with the cardinals, which then created the issue with the schism.
I got you. And then gets it down to finally where we get to unum sanctum and other things where we go, hey, story's over. Okay, listen, we're gonna solve it from here on. The Pope's infallible. This is it. It's over. Don't think that you cardinals are going to be able to kind of sneak in and control it this kind of way to do it.
Yes,
This is
but
it's over.
conciliarism is still an issue in the sense that when you look at somebody like John the 23rd, Vatican II, Vatican I, Vatican II, you have historians like Benedict Serre who see a lot of correlation between the conciliarism of the 14th century, the
Mm,
rationale used, and what happened in the 20th, in the 20th century. And the same way as you have that love-hated relationship with Catholics who don't like conciliarism and Catholics who love conciliarism.
right.
You have pro and cons of we want to have a very strong pope, or we want to have a pope who can be, willing to be collaborative. And I think
Right.
that's the core bit, if when you look at the way Francis was criticized for being somewhat, open. But when he made up his mind, he made up his mind, and that was it. So I think some of the questions asked of Pope are the same in the 14th as they are in the 21st century.
How interesting. What an interesting time frame. What an interesting, as we said at the beginning, right? You always need a flow chart to kind of watch to see how it all comes together. If you're a visual person like me, you might be hanging on for a little bit just to be able to be able to see how all the pieces fit in. And so a fascinating time period, and certainly one that is impactful to Christianity. I mean, it's something that really ends up making a long-term effect and difference, right? I mean,
Oh,
to the
oh
way that we
yes.
would see how Christianity operates.
And I think that not so much the Avignon Papacy as the schism is like, Urban VI, when he's elected, obviously had something mental happening to him because, I mean, he did things like, torturing cardinals, insulting them. And what do you do with the ruler who is no more capable when you are the church? And I
Mm,
think that nobody has presented the schism like this, but that is the core of the schism. What do you do when you elected somebody who is not capable?
mm,
We only knew that Ronald Reagan had dementia after he was gone.
right,
So
right,
those
right,
are still very important questions there is no system in place in electoral systems where here you have somebody elected for life, and
right,
human bodies are not perfect, and there is a
right,
moment when even the Pope is not going to be
right.
perfect. What do we do with that? And it has never been solved. Nobody has said we need, well, except that now the popes themselves can resign, which is something very modern.
Hmm. Well, what a fascinating time. Thank you so much for you
Welcome.
spending some time with us. And as people want to learn more about kind of where to follow you and your all the good work that you are doing as well, is there a particular spot or a place that you would send us to learn more about the good work that you're doing?
Well, there is the website at the University of Rhode Island, but I think that if you put Avignon Papacy, Rollo-Koster is going to be
Right.
there. I
That's what I
also,
did. Okay.
in the US, I'm more or less it.
That's how we
Um,
found you.
I also was the lead editor of the Cambridge History of the Papacy. So those are 3 volumes, 2,400 pages for anyone who is interested. Three
Right.
huge volumes. It was a huge enterprises, and we finished it in 2025. And I have a good colleague, Blake Beatty, who did the article on the Avignon Papacy. But otherwise, I have my 2 latest books are one is on the history of the schism, which was published in 2022 by Cambridge. And then I had one in 2015 on the Avignon Papacy, where I go in details. But I, I I try to be interesting even for the large public. So
Sure.
it was my
Sure.
little in between.
Right. Right. So if you
Not too much academic.
That's right. But if you want to be able to follow that and learn more about this interesting time period, we have an absolute subject matter expert right here who has written and published on part of that as well to do. So, Dr. Joëlle Rollo-Koster, thank you so much for
Thank you.
spending time with us and helping us learn more. If you are watching all of this on YouTube, don't forget to go back to our webpage at the centerforchristianhistory.com where you can see little snippets about something that happens every day in Christian history and other episodes of other information of things that we're following on our podcast. And follow us on all our socials. Everything is there as well too. So thanks again.
Thank you. Um,